Hey, everybody, in this episode, it's myself and Benjamin B., and we are discussing relapse. Now, we are going to take you through the progression of a relapse, kind of the stages of a relapse, and give you some suggestions, some pointers to circumvent actually picking up the drink and the drug. Now, what you'll find is actually picking up the drink and the drug, that's the end point. There's many things that happen in this process. So we need to be aware of that. We're taking you through the emotional side of a relapse, the mental side of a relapse, and then ultimately the behavioral side of a relapse when we actually pick up that drink or that drug. So we cover all that and more. Enjoy the show. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I'm your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, Ben?
Yes, sir.
What's happening?
Chilling, dude, because it's chilly in here.
It is cold. We had all the air conditioners replaced over the weekend, and yeah, I'd say they work.
Someone set it to 66.
Yeah, it's like a freaking ice box in here.
Probably just to get it going. Why would they do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
To let us know that they work. All of our northern listeners are probably
Laughing,
yeah, because they got their space heaters going.
Yeah, I got my hoodie on. Probably 80 degrees out.
Yeah. Anything new in your world?
Nothing new, Tom. Plugging away.
Cool.
That's it. Yeah. I know,
Yeah, it's something
right?
you were going to ask me.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what the world's favorite drug is?
Okay, so this is interesting. Ben brought this up, and I said, oh, you should bring this up on the beginning of the podcast. And he forgot. So that's why I had to prompt you to say it.
Oh, you didn't really want to know what was new in my life. You wanted me to ask a question. I got you. Sometimes I'm missing your signals, Tom.
So, but anyways.
As long as we've been together.
What's the question again?
What is the world's favorite drug?
Most favorite drug. My answer originally was cocaine, because cocaine's a hell of a drug. But it's not.
Caffeine.
As I drink coffee.
That makes sense. Almost everybody consumes caffeine on some level.
Yeah. Caffeine can be pretty nasty, I mean, it doesn't look in the end. People have heard me say this. I would never, steal grandma's car to go get a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? So if we look at it from a behavioral standpoint, it's fine,
It's funny when I do the pre-screen calls, pre-admission calls.
Yeah.
Under stimulants, I'm talking to some hardcore drug addicts and alcoholics, and all of a sudden you're asking about fentanyl and meth and Adderall and benzos, and all of a sudden you're like, and caffeine. How much caffeine do you drink a day? They're like, what?
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is, and we see this here at Rock, people in early recovery will go off the walls on caffeine and drink like 8 energy drinks a day if you don't stop them.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's literally switching addictions,
Yeah. And energy drinks themselves are super addicting. I don't think it's just the caffeine. It's probably everything else in them too.
Well, some of them make you feel like pins and needles, like the tingly.
Oh, the niacin and all that in it?
Yeah. So, anything to get a feeling, Ben.
Yeah, it's true.
So we can tie this into today's subject. We wanted to discuss relapse. This is obviously a very broad topic, but it's something that we don't focus on solely a lot. So we wanted to cover, because there's been some people in my life relatively recently that have relapsed, and myself and Ben, working in the treatment space, at this point, we've worked with thousands of people, and being able to have a front row seat to their recovery has been very beneficial. But with that, we also witness a lot of relapse. And I had a conversation with a lady this morning, and her daughter relapsed, and it kind of caught her by surprise. Now they don't live together, so it was, there's only so much that you're going to pick up on if you don't live with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyways, we wanted to break this down into really three different uh three topics within relapse, right? What to look for. And people oftentimes just equate relapse to picking up a drug, but it starts well before.
Because you just said that, I got a statement I'd like to hear you analyze. My sponsor said to me a long time ago, he said to me, Ben, a relapse ends with the drink.
Right.
It doesn't start
Yeah.
with the drink.
Yeah. I agree with that because, and that we're covering that today,
Okay.
right? So take what you said, Ben. The relapse ends with picking up whatever it is: alcohol, drugs, food, clicking buy now on Amazon, whatever it is that you're addicted to. It ends with that. Starts well before. So we have it broken down into three different kind of subtypes, and we'll get into each one more specifically. But we have the emotional side of it, the mental side of it, and then the behavioral side of it. And the behavioral side of it, the reason that it's going to be the third is because that's when we're actually picking up. That's when we're acting out on the behavioral side of it. But notice that the first one is the emotional side of it. The emotional side of it is when, things start to get a little uneasy for us, right? So what can this look like? I mean, Ben, speaking to this, most of the time when we see somebody that relapses, what's one of the first things that they end up doing? If we were to analyze their relapse, what's one of the first things that happens more on an emotional level?
You start to see them decompensate, whether it's through anger, depression. I mean, a lot of it comes out. You were saying the third part's behavior, but a lot of it you see in negative behaviors, so to speak. Make sense?
Yeah, but if somebody's depressed, something causes this depression.
Situational or physiological?
I would say more situational, because if it's physiological, chances are they could be on some sort of, antidepressant. But let's look at what you said. They become angry, they become depressed, they become whatever feeling. What causes that? What do you think one of the first things that we see from somebody before they reach that point?
Honestly, a lack of action is what comes to my mind.
Okay, so let's boil this down. What would be the lack of action? What are they lacking in?
Probably.
It's going to smack you in the face as soon as I say
yeah, you're like dangling this in front of me, and I'm like, where's he going with this? I mean, all the basics, dude. Not doing step work.
Okay.
Not praying.
Okay.
Not getting good sleep.
Okay.
Not taking inventory.
Okay.
Not calling your sponsor.
Okay.
Not listening to this podcast.
Now, if somebody's not doing all of those things, what would you say they're doing? One word.
I don't know, Tom.
Isolating.
Gotcha.
They've adopted this they're just in complete isolation, right? So if we look at it from an emotional standpoint, we're societal creatures. Most people, right? We need to be around people most of the time. Now, when somebody's in quote unquote sobriety, right? And I say quote unquote because sobriety is so much more about stopping drugs and alcohol. We have a community of people around us. We have things that fulfill us through hobbies, whatever it is. We have a group of guys or girls that we can rely on at any given time. Our relationships are back. We're able to go. We have some money in our pocket. We're doing very well in our careers or whatever the case is. One of the first things that happens from an emotional relapse is going to be isolation. We start pulling back on those things.
And shutting down.
Yeah.
because it doesn't necessarily have to be you can be amongst people and still isolate. We see that here. I see it with the client this morning in particular that is all of a sudden not talking to anybody. All of a sudden, like they're in a room full of people, but just totally walls up, closing themselves off. So it's not necessarily directly related to being around people either. It can be. Don't get me wrong. Like you should put yourself in a community, get that involved. Whether you're in treatment, you've done it through 12-step, through church, whatever the case, your other hobbies, whatever the case is. But there's also emotional telltales where somebody can be in a group of people and still look very lonely, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's something to keep an eye out for too.
That's a scary place to be. When you're in a group of people and you feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened to me, where I just feel just out of place, just don't want to be there.
That is so common with people that go into 12-step rooms. When they go, those guys that are or girls that are picking up their white chip, they'll tell you they feel alone in a room of 1,000 people. Like that is such a common thing to happen. I don't know how to express it any stronger. That you see that with newcomers all the time. Our clients, we'll take them to outside meetings, and they'll be like, "I don't get it. They don't really have the ability or the skills sober to connect with people." Because let's call it what it is. They use drugs and alcohol to connect with others.
Yeah.
So you take that away, and all of a sudden their social lubricant is gone, and it's even harder for them to connect.
Yeah, and I mean it's not hard to do really when I see people going into the meetings for the very first time or call it even their first month or whatever. It's not a difficult thing to do. You just got to go up to somebody and say, "Hi, hey,
Yeah.
hey, how you doing? I'm new here. Don't really know what I'm doing, what this is all about." 90% of the people in there will kind of, connect with you because you have the lack of connection skills. Somebody did that for them.
And one of the keys to that, I talk to this all the time, is continuing to show up so that when you are struggling with that, people recognize and maybe they invite you over.
Right.
Make yourself a billboard for, hey, I'm isolating, so to speak.
Yeah.
But keep showing up. That way, it's kind of funny because even I did that this weekend. Here I am, 14 years sober. I went down to the pool yesterday with Kai, and there's a whole group of people that I know, and I'm like looking around for chairs, and I see everyone I know. I wave to them, and I'm like going to like dart off and sit by myself. And then this older lady that I've become friends with down at the pool, she's like, "Ben, come sit with us." Like what I'm explaining, she literally did for me yesterday because I'm down there all the time,
Right.
showing up, different contexts in a meeting, but socially, that's something that I'm working on. You put yourself in a position enough and people will almost sometimes do the work for you.
Yeah.
This is a really good time to talk about the Big Book study, Tom.
Oh, why don't you tell us about the Big Book study, Ben?
So, Eric on Monday nights is doing a Big Book study, if you don't know. But the reason that I bring it up is because this ties into So I sat down with the sponsee this weekend. This is the best way for me to explain it. And I was taking them through the doctor's opinion, which that's why I bring up the Big Book study. You'll know what I'm talking about if you jump on and go to, I believe it should be the very first episode.
First two
episodes that Eric did, because he goes through the doctor's opinion. But basically, it breaks it down. I can explain my addiction and my alcoholism in 4 words. I have a mental obsession and a physical allergy. And I always ask my sponsees, just as I did this weekend on Friday night, which one can I do something about? The mental obsession or the physical allergy? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go back and sign up and get the recordings of it. But Eric breaks that down beautifully. Point is if I'm allergic to something, such as a peanut allergy, just because I don't eat peanuts for 10 years, I go pick up peanuts again in 10 years, I'm probably still going to have an allergic reaction or whatever the allergy may be, shellfish, you name it. But with that being said, the reason I bring it up, the answer to the question, the thing that I can do something about is the mental obsession to pick up the first one. That's what ties into the emotional sobriety. That's why when we're in recovery, we work steps, we work with a therapist, we go to groups, we do all the things because we're addressing the anger, the depression, the sadness, the anxiety, the nervousness, the sleeplessness, all the things that come with it that precede the thought to pick up that first drink.
Right.
So we're working on the mental obsession. Once that kicks into gear and you have that first one, you're off to the races because you have the allergy. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the Big Book Study.
Monday nights, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Go to realrecoverytalk.com/bigbookstudy to register. All you got to do is put your email in and you're going to get a Zoom link, and that Zoom link stays the same. We probably got, I would guess, 8 weeks left. So we're probably about halfway through. And then I'm either going to do it with an Al-Anon speaker or, I don't know, got to fill in that space with something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's worked very well, and I think it would be, yeah. So anyways, but staying on the emotional side of it, and then we're going to move into more of the mental relapse side of it. Emotionally, so what are some things that you can look out for? Obviously, isolation. If your loved one is staying at home with you, right? Not leaving their room, not partaking in whatever, missing functions, missing work, those sorts of things. You know what to look for. But also they get snappy, angry, easy. Again, all the things that you were talking about. Those are all a direct result of isolation and not, doing the things that they should have been doing this whole time to stay in recovery.
See, we're lucky, Tom, where we can throw out these examples. I'll tell you the most prevalent one that I see, and keep in mind, like with the center that we run at Rock, we've got our housing. We have staff that has constant eyes on the housing. Tom and I, we get the shift reports. We go by the house sometimes and see what's going on. But the first thing that we begin to notice when a client is sliding downhill, I would say the number one thing that I see is that they stop coming out of their room, like you just said, and sleeping all day. If all of a sudden, every chance that they have, they're going to their room and sleeping or not coming out of their room, sitting on their phone, whatever the case is, that's generally, I think, the number one telltale that I see. Would you agree with that, or you see something else at all?
Yeah, no, I would say so. Just disconnecting.
Yeah.
Because if you look at that, if somebody is isolating and they're just disconnected, I mean, there could be a level of depression that precedes that, right? That's been undiagnosed. And that happens quite a bit, right? But oftentimes I'm thinking about one person right now in particular that he just can't snap out of it. And number one, I think he thinks that he's different than everybody else. He thinks that he doesn't need this as much as everybody else. His girlfriend broke up with him and can't let that go. Like there's things that have happened that he's just unable to break away from, which causes this isolation. And well, because I'm not like everybody else and all these circumstances have happened, well, I'll just stay to myself. And that's a very, bless you, it's a very dangerous place for people to be. Now, he is doing better, but that's kind of the trap that we can get.
And there's a practical application to that. I'm going to call it what it is, because I get in those mindsets. I think every human being does at some point. But if you're sitting by yourself thinking about that stuff, it just ruminates and gets worse and worse. A very simple solution to that is just getting out of your freaking bed and getting out of your room. Get out in the world. Do something. Your mind might not come off it completely, but you're done for if you just sit there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which takes us into our next point, which is now going to be the mental game. And this is oftentimes where the battle is lost, right? The mental side of a relapse is this kind of place that we get into where we're starting to like entertain the idea of picking up. We're starting to entertain what it looks like. Well, if I just had one beer, or if I just had one glass of wine, what would it really do? I mean, my gosh, I was drinking 25 beers and a half a bottle of whiskey and taking Xanax. So what's one going to do? And this is kind of the progression that we see in terms of a relapse, right? We started isolating, we start getting a little snappy, angry, things just they don't feel good, right? We've totally disconnected from everybody. We're no longer going to meetings for whatever reason. Or maybe we are going to meetings still, but we're just not talking to anybody. Like that stuff has already started. We stopped making our bed. We stopped praying in the morning. All the things that you had mentioned. Now we get into the mental side of it, right? And when somebody relapses, primarily they're going back to what they know makes everything better: drugs and alcohol.
Alcohol and drugs are a solution
We
to an
start
internal problem.
creeping up towards. Now you're starting to understand why picking up is the end, right?
Yeah. And there's a line in the big book, again, in the doctor's opinion, if we can only get that ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. If you're walking around like a ball of anxiety, a ball of depression, ball of anger, all the ones I keep repeating, I know I take that first drink, I down that first one, I'm like, oh, it's the relief, the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks or drug. It literally takes the edge off instantly.
Right.
Problem is we don't stop.
Yeah.
If I could stop at 2 beers, that would be a great solution. It wouldn't be a problem. I'm stressed out, I drink 2, I'm good. But I'm an alcoholic. Once I start, I don't stop. The allergy that I referenced
Yeah.
earlier. But the romanticizing of it starts to sound like a good idea when you're sitting that tense for that long. You just want relief.
Right. Yeah, and along with the romanticizing of it, we start to downplay everything, right? And there's a saying inside recovery and inside AA and stuff like that we have built-in forgetters. And I think this speaks well to that. We tend to forget what it was like. We forget about the DUIs and the relationships that we destroyed and the things that we pawned and the promiscuity that we were involved in and all the dangerous stuff that we seem to forget about all that. Or if we didn't forget about it, we downplay it.
This makes me think of something. There's a line in the big book under how it works that says, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Now, I could take the word anger, replace it with depression, jealousy, anxiety, nervous, whatever. You take any negative word. I used to interpret that as, if we were to live, I had to be free of anger. I'm like, oh man, I'm never allowed to get angry again. That's what I thought it meant for years. What I've come to realize over the course of time is that I've got to learn to free myself from that anger without taking a drink or a drug. I used to misinterpret that because I was like shooting for super spiritual Saint Ben, never getting angry ever again, which is not reasonable at all. Tom's seen me angry. Like it's going to happen to every single human being. The thing that we teach you through therapy, 12 steps, etc., is how to free yourself of that anger when it sets in. Not if, but when.
Right, managing it. Because we say this all the time. Life doesn't stop happening just because we got sober.
No, you just put out a little reel on that of us talking about it where arguably life got harder.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have the drugs and alcohol to turn to anymore. right? My dad had a stroke. My daughter just recently got diagnosed type 1 diabetic. I've had people come in and out of my life for over the past almost 15 years. Things, financial issues, like fill in the blank. It's all happened, right? And that's why I think it's important that, like, when we get into that headspace of now we're starting to like, oh, maybe this is a good idea. Or maybe it's not even necessarily a good idea, but now we're getting into the headspace of, well, maybe it won't be as bad as last time. Like, part of us realizes that it is going to be a little screwed up and it is going to make things a little bit more difficult, but it's manageable. It won't get as bad. I won't let it get as bad as it was before. It's a very, very, very slippery slope. And I've met very few, and I say very few because there are the outliers that have managed to somehow, and I would question if they are a real addict or an alcoholic to begin with, that have been able to pick back up and manage it. But, again, it's who's to say that they are managing it? You know what I mean? Hang on, let me finish my point. When we get into that headspace, we're very close to picking up the actual drink or the drug. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not interventions that can take place at this point. But it needs to be recognized and it needs to be acted on rather quickly, is what I would say.
I was just going to throw it out there. We've been doing this a long time, Tom. For the outliers that you're referring to, say the guy that can take one or two drinks or whatever the case is, no one to this day has been able to explain to me how logically having those one or two drinks has vastly improved their life.
No. Well, I mean, it just, listen, I'd be the first to admit that if somebody told me, Tom, I put this computer chip in your head and you will be able to drink 2-3 beers a night for the rest of your life and not have to worry about it going the way that it did, sign me up.
It's funny. This made me think of something from yesterday, dude. So I was down at the pool, and there used to be a guy named Alex that rented the back parking lot of our building here at Rock to do RV rentals.
Yeah.
We just so happen to live in the same complex, and I saw him down at the pool. He was having a barbecue, and he had a buddy there. And Alex, bro, if you know him, he teases everybody and just he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
Kind of annoying, but like you gotta love him kind of dude. But one of his buddies walks up and he starts like poking fun at me. Alex is like, "Oh man, this loser here has been sober 14 years and I'm drinking a beer right in front of him." And I look at Alex, I'm like, "You know what, man? I'll tell you what, it's hot out. For a brief second, that beer sounds good. Nice, tasty Modelo, like, okay." But I looked at him, I'm like, dude, that's literally going to do nothing for me. Like, what's the point? And, it was just kind of funny because that fleeting thought, like, oh, that would taste good. But I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't battle it or fight it at all. I just thought it'd be funny to bring up because Alex is such a punk, dude.
Well, the beer doesn't even taste good, if you really think about it. I mean, and I've drank lots of beers in my day. In fact, it's my drug of choice. But I've never had a beer that I'm like, ooh, that's good. Never, not one time.
Really?
No.
I would argue on my end that I have.
I mean, I've been to microbreweries. I've had, I just never.
Which brings up a point. I'm not like romanticizing or glorifying it, but the reality of the situation is funny because Eric and I were talking about this the other day. Sometimes it's taboo to talk about the good times that we did have or the things that we actually enjoyed. Because I'm going to call it what it is. If I didn't in the beginning have good experiences drinking and drugging, I would not have continued doing it. So like, I'm not romanticizing it. I'm not glorifying it. But for a brief second, sometimes you do think of the good old days, so to speak. Bill W. talks about that in his story.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I mean, look, we're gonna do it. If a certain song comes on, I've talked about this a lot. It'll take me right back to Tony's Lounge. In particular, Motley Crue, Girls, Girls, Girls.
I kind of want to take a trip with you up to this Tony's Lounge just to
It's not even there anymore. I just found out they knocked it down last year.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Turned it into a parking lot. Literally. What's that song? We paved paradise and made it a parking lot.
Yeah. That's close.
Paved paradise and
made it a parking lot? I don't know. I know where you're going with that, though.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine bought the property and he knocked it over, and that's where he stores all of his. And the funny thing is, I used to drink with him there, and he bought it, knocked it down. He's in asphalt business. That's what everybody does up there. They either lay asphalt or seal driveways. Everybody that I know. Yeah, so.
Maybe, did he get sober? He had a resentment against Tony's Lounge?
No, he's
knocked
not
it down?
No, he's not.
It's like I'm paving this thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, just back on the behavioral side of it or the mental side of it, this is where things are starting to get dirty. It's starting to get ugly. Family members, you're picking up on this. They could be maybe reaching out to their old friends that they associated with back in the day, whatever the case is. I mean, they're right there. This is an opportunity to maybe start engaging in conversations with them, start talking to them about the things that you've picked up on. They may be receptive to it. They may not. But this is also where you would want to start thinking about, okay, if what I think is about to happen is going to happen, what do I do as a family member? What are the things that we can do as a family to either prevent it, which I probably venture to say you can't prevent, you can try, but what are some of the boundaries and stuff? Like going back to the basics, like you probably were in that position 6 months ago or whatever, going back there, right? But then we get into the last part, which is the behavioral side of it. And this is like what Ben said, this is where things really end, right? So we've taken you through a progression. The relapse starts well before somebody picks up, and I often call this the pre-lapse. All these things we're right there. Now it's just a matter of fuck it.
I think that we should definitely mention this is the terminology that we utilize. This is dry versus sober. And I think to explain it to family members, if you see somebody in zombie mode, they're dry. Like, if they're not going anywhere, doing anything, making headway, starting to make some headway in life, dude, they're going to drink and drug again because they're not building a life that's worth hanging on to sobriety for.
Yeah. Family members oftentimes ask, how do you know? Like, what are some things that you can look out for? And 100% of the time, I say, look, you'll know. You'll know. You'll get, like, we have that intuition about ourselves, It's everybody's different, so it's hard for me to say. I could sit here and say, and honestly, I mean, everything that we just rattled off in this podcast are the things that I would look for. But everybody's different. Their communities are different. What makes them tick is different. But in the end, you'll know. Trust your gut.
The best example of this, in my opinion, is chapter 2 out of the big book. There's a Solution, the story about Jim, the milk and whiskey guy.
Yeah.
Eric goes over that big time. It ends with what are referred to as the sudden lease. Like, to the alcoholic, to the drug addict, they picked up suddenly. Like, they didn't see it coming.
Right.
But as the reader and the person on the outside, I'm reading about Jim, I can see it 3-4 paragraphs ahead of time. Like, this dude's done for.
Yep.
He's full of resentment. He's old behaviors of going to a roadside bar that he used to drink at, but he just wants to get a sandwich. And then Jim's like, suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I poured milk into my whiskey, it wouldn't hurt me on a full stomach.
Yeah,
it wasn't suddenly, dude. There was 3 or 4 paragraphs ahead of it. The prelapse that you're referring to It was laid out, but as alcoholics and addicts that are in it, we're blinded. We can't see that. I need that pointed out to me a lot of times, and that's the importance again of like somebody getting sober, constantly taking inventory so that we're aware of it before it happens.
Yeah, and it as a addict and as an alcoholic, it's primarily our responsibility. You know, I don't want family members coming away from this episode thinking, okay, well, if I look out for these things and I notice that they're doing X, Y, and Z, well, then I need or I should do X, Y, and Z. That's not the purpose of this, because ultimately it isn't your responsibility. Now, you can do what you can within your comfort level. What?
I was just thinking to myself, if you're there to witness all this, they're probably in the wrong place to begin with. What I mean by that is if a loved one is there witnessing somebody's journey to stopping drinking and drugging, and they've already put the drink and drug down and you're worried about the relapse, chances are they're probably under your roof and they shouldn't be.
Well, I knew that's where you were going to go, and I'll push back on that a little bit.
I like controversy. Let's
well,
go.
I mean, and I know you're going to agree with this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like if somebody were to come to Rock and they complete 4 months worth of treatment and they do sober living, you know, for 3 months and they return back home, well, they should be back home. They should be underneath their roof, you know, because it doesn't go to say that if you complete, you know, call it 7 months worth of treatment and sober living, that all of a sudden you're going to be sober moving forward. That's not true. But I also see what you're saying. Like, what has their sobriety consisted of up to this point to where you found it okay to move them back into your house?
Did they earn their way back in?
Exactly.
So to speak.
Did they,
with proof.
Right. Yeah. Or did they just go to detox and then come back home? Because arguably all this stuff, if somebody just went to detox for 7 to 10 days and they're back home, well, this isn't even a relapse. This is just they just picked back up. Detox didn't work, because a relapse is, and I wanted to say by definition, but I'm not going to say by definition because I don't know, but you have to be in recovery in order to relapse. I could say that I've relapsed 1,000 times over. If the definition of relapse was staying sober for 1 or 2 days and picking back up, that's not a relapse.
It's funny you ask that, because I'm sitting here thinking about my case. I would tell you this is the only time in my life I've ever stayed sober. Therefore, I technically don't think I ever really relapsed. I was just, even though I put together like maybe 60 days here or something, 30 days there. Dude, I can't even say I relapsed because I mentally just wasn't there yet.
No, you were relapsed on everything else. The only thing that you weren't doing was picking up.
That's me reflecting back on my life. Like, you know, people have to, because again, I always refer to the pre-admissions, pre-screens we do here. Like, there's a question on there, what's the longest you've ever remained sober? And some people say 5 years. You know, we got a couple clients here right now. One of them had 10 years, I think.
I know we have one lady, she had 2 or 3.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
And to your point that you were talking about earlier, I actually am dealing with 2 cases this weekend, potential clients coming here. One, the mom went and picked her son up from detox because they weren't happy with the facility. Calls me like, things aren't going well. I spent a couple hours on the phone with her yesterday. But then,
those are always fun.
Yeah. You should have left him at the detox, regardless of what was happening.
Yeah.
But the other hand, we have a gentleman that on his own, I don't know, willingness, actually went to detox. He's never done treatment before. Decided this on his own. Went to detox, got detox, sat at home for a few days, and was like, this isn't working. Called us and was like, I'm driving down from Indiana. I'm going to do the whole treatment. I don't even know what that looks like. Let's just do it.
Speaking of, is he coming?
Yeah, he should be here. I texted him that we were going to be doing this.
Oh, nice. So he's like legit close.
He's probably downstairs. Oh, I got to train the clients in 5 minutes, Tom.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. No, that's good. I mean, look, again, behavioral side of it, they pick up. I tell this to everybody. In fact, I'm working with a guy right now, and I told him I want you to write down all of your relapses, and I don't want you to write. I want you to write very minimal about the actual relapse, and write out the process. Like, what was it like? Because we need to analyze this, because there's things to learn inside of these relapses. Oftentimes, there's patterns. There's things that we can learn from it, and I tell everybody. A relapse, unfortunately, it sometimes can result in a death sentence, but it's, and you may feel like a failure, but like we've said, fail forward. What can we learn about it? What can we pick up on it from it? And really analyze it and see where we can improve. But, these things that we discussed today, I think, are the nuts and bolts of relapse. And so if you can kind of understand it within this framework, you'll be able to spot it. You'll be able to pick up on it and do what you can, but ultimately get professionals involved. You can obviously reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Get involved in the Big Book Study. Join our support group on Facebook. It's called the Sobriety Network. It's everybody in there. There's addicts, alcoholics, people that, family members and stuff. So there's resources out there. Try not to let it get to the point of actually picking up. So anyways, that it, Ben?
Yes, sir.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.